Hey there, friends. Stephen Pataski here, founder of the Luxus Group, and thank you very much for dialing in today. Today's is interesting because it's probably the most common question been asked over the past 6 months. Is the market going to crash? And so I will start off by saying this: I don't know, because no one knows, because it's a crystal ball, and otherwise we'd all have it all figured out. But we do have some indicators that would suggest that I don't believe it's going to. And I'm going to explain today why I believe that. So please do not take it as gospel. Do not have a crystal ball. But I'm going to show you how we evaluate deals and how we evaluate the market, both from a macro level, effectively the 30,000 feet looking down on the market as a whole, what we believe are the indicators that would be a sign of a potential crash. And then the micro level, right at the communities, like right in the specific heart of these homes and these communities, to determine how we can potentially, first off, avoid a disaster or a big reset like what happened in 2008. And obviously our goal is not just to preserve capital, but also to appreciate capital, to make money out of it. So use these tools that I'm going to give you today for the future as you evaluate your own deals. And again, they're imperfect. We all look at the same data, but the little hustles, the little angles we take on the ground, I don't see a lot of people using. And so hopefully today, some of these tips can help you when you're having a look at these properties and determining, am I overpaying for a property? And particularly in the market now, when you have to buy a property that's on and listed and sold within 24 or 48 hours, or you're competing against multiple bids, most people think they're overpaying. They're not overpaying, because that's history will dictate that. You are paying more than probably the previous person, but are you paying less than what someone's ultimately going to buy it from you? So it's really important to get informed, because I think a lot of people right now are waiting for the reset or the crash. This is something I don't see coming, to be perfectly honest. I very well could be hit by a freight train. So again, I take it with a grain of salt, but I'll show you why I believe, and I'm pretty convicted we have still a little run to go yet. But it's very specific to the market. So that's what we're going to cover today. Now, before we dive into how we underwrite these deals and we look at these deals as a whole, as always, want to say thank you for joining me today. You get to hear me talk for 20 minutes. I always say it's 20 minutes, and sometimes it ends up being much longer. But anyway, that's just me. But I hope you like the content today. If you do like it and you find a little nugget of information that you appreciate, you think it adds value to your experience, my ask is like it. It's like so simple. That takes literally, when you're done, just click like. It's the simplest thing. Sharing it takes a bit more effort. But I really would appreciate if you'd think of someone that'd be like, oh, my friend Susie's buying this home and I want her to know this information. Please send it to Susie and your mom and your friends and your colleagues, because that's how we spread the word. We can't get out this free information if no one's sharing it. So thank you for doing that. That's how we're growing. And it means the world to me, truly, if you were to do that. So thank you. But in the meantime, let me try to add some value to this process for you, so you'll know if you actually want to share it. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, this is a free-flowing show, so no editing or water. There's going to be some slides that are going to pop up, so excuse all of that. So first off, how do we look? I mean, the most common thing people look at is trying to compare this to 2008. Obviously, 2008 to 2012 presented a phenomenally amazing buying opportunity for people that were watching the real estate drop and how we're liquid and we're able to pull the trigger on some homes. So I think a lot of people are holding out hope, that are sitting in the silence, maybe missed the last 5-year run-up of property, especially the COVID run-up of the last 16, 18 months. And they're like, I'm going to wait for that to happen. So now, will it happen? Again, that goes down to the question about no crystal ball. But what are the fundamental differences from 2008 to today that we can use as a tool in our toolbox to actually understand whether or not we're going to see a similar crash? So Heather's going to throw up a slide here for you. Now, this is the macro level aspect. So when I say macro, we're at a very high level. This is data that covers all residential real estate classes. It's not just luxury vacation homes in Hawaii. This is stuff that's in the Midwest, the East Coast, the West Coast, everywhere. So the information isn't perfected. So we're going to get down to that micro level stuff. I just want to look at a high level what it means. So you can go to this site anytime and get all this information. They have great stats. There's probably other sites with better stats, but I'm just using this more to illustrate kind of where we're at. Okay, so first slide here. Any market, fundamentals, very simple, supply and demand. How much supply is in the market? How much demand is there for that supply? So the first thing I would look at in any situation is how much supply is on the market. Let's have a look back. If you can see the map there, 2008, 9, 10, look at that supply. Unbelievable how high that supply was. Obviously, and then you have no demand, which we're going to come back to. The supply dropped, but it took 3 or 4 years to clean up that supply. And you can see it's kind of bouncing along now. Look at 2021. There's effectively no supply. It's at one of the lowest points it's been since, aside from early 2000s, one of the lowest points it's been in the last 30, 40 years. So if that was this huge vertical curve and there's all the supply coming in the market, I would be concerned because developers can get ahead of themselves. They see this opportunity to build. They build out many, many years in advance to ensure they got the inventory for the market, and all this supply comes up. So there just frankly isn't much supply in the market, and nor is there going to be. And this is the big reason why that's different than 2008, is supply is hard to add right now. Demand is so high, but the reason is COVID has created this crazy disruption in the supply chain. So if I'm someone that's looking to order a refrigerator, I used to be able to walk into the appliance store and have it delivered at 4 o'clock the same day. Now there are 8-month back orders for these homes. If I want certain steel products or wood products or different things, they're all on back order. So even in markets where supply can generally come on quick, now I'm going to say places that have an abundant source of labor, don't have geographical restrictions like islands, some of the lower tax jurisdictions like Nevada, Arizona, Texas, where usually they could just add a lot of supply very quickly because you can turn around and build a house in a year. They're having troubles turning things around so fast or that fast. So as a result, you have this situation where today's market, there is no supply and it's not going to be corrected quickly. So that's the first fundamental thing I look at when I think of supply. It's okay, this isn't the same as 2008. We don't have this massive run up, and it's not going to change anytime soon. Now, industry is smart. Supply chain will get fixed, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen anytime soon. I say soon, the next 12 months. So I think we still have ourselves quite a bit of run up with this low supply environment that just can't even satiate the basic demand, let alone like the really wild demand that currently exists. So we'll move to the next slide and kind of share where I think the demand lives. Now, again, this is macro level, so don't take it, I'll say too seriously, but you can just see the very simple statistic here. Debt service payments as a percentage of disposable income. So effectively, I make $100. How much am I spending against my mortgage? Now, interest rates have been cheap for a long time. We're going to talk about things that could soften demand, such as rising interest rates, which are coming and they're already here, as a matter of fact. Some of the lowest percentage of disposable income. So there's a huge financial capacity here for people to invest more into their homes than did. Now, there's a debt problem. Again, I don't want to advocate to say there isn't debt issues out there in North America. There is. But when I compare this is a comparison to illustrate the difference between now and 2008. Look at the difference. It's not even in the same ballpark. So again, another reason to understand, I don't see a crash coming. There are some prices spiking, and we're going to see in future slides here in a moment about where we start to see a plateau and potentially a reset. But it's not going to be because people can't afford to pay their bills. Now, if interest rates go from, effectively 0 to 8% in the course of 2 years, yes, that will soften demand and supply will catch up, but it's not going to be a 12 to 24 month thing. It's likely going to take a bit more time because there is financial capacity currently in the market. Now I'll shift to the next slide here. I'm just going to use a couple examples here to show pricing indexes. So again, this is taking into account all different classes within residential real estate. But look at 2009 again, and look at 2020. But a lot of people have forgotten and haven't actually really looked at it. Look at where the price peaked in Hawaii in 2007-8. You can see that on the index on the side. Look at when it crossed the line. It only crossed the line the last couple of years. And a lot of submarkets like the Big Island, Kauai, a lot of them only crossed that line in the last 12 months. So think about that for perspective. It's taking 15 years to catch up to 2008 prices. 15 years. So from 2007, 2006 to 2022, 15 years for pricing to catch up. A lot of people have just forgotten how high prices were in 2004 to 2006. They were up there. Now you can see it was a bubble. That's exactly what a bubble looks like. It's kind of like a bubble. And then when there's this big reset, but we all have been thinking the last 10 years, but in reality is, as much as there was a bubble, that was 15 years ago. Prices should have caught up to that a long time ago. So what I think about through my, small little brain, I think about the idea is that, okay, if prices are just crossing a threshold from 15 years ago, we're probably not priced out of the market. We're probably not in a bubble. You can't have 15 years of inflation and in the last 6 months and be the same price as it was 15 years ago. There should be an increase. So that's another reason I look at to say, okay, will there be a soft landing or a crash or a plateau? Again, I think the crash is unlikely, but I do see a soft landing and such. So reset there. Again, we'll cover micro markets soon, because some of those micro markets where you don't get these type of statistics, you have to ask the questions directly to the agents, is you'll actually see that some prices are just crossing, literally just crossing in the last 60 days where they were in 2007, 2006, in that range. So that's why, again, I don't believe we're actually in a bubble right now. We're just in this situation where we have a supply issue and you have this really high demand as people are moving money from stock market and other crypto and other assets into real estate. Next slide, please. California, big bubble, the big bubble there. So that one, California had a lot of inventory very, very fast in that time, and they were one of the worst to suffer. Let's hit the next slide. You can see those well. 2018, 19, 20 is when they crossed that threshold, 14 years. Look, another one, Florida, big bubble as well. Probably the worst hit. They took the longest to recover. You can see they just crossed the line, taking an average in the last 12 months. So that bubble was only crossed 15 years later to basically the day. So that's just an example. If I were to show other ones, and I encourage you to look in your own state. I just was looking at Texas. Texas basically had a nice straight line curve, didn't have a bubble. They didn't have an overabundance of supply. And Texas is benefiting from more of a migration situation where people are migrating to Mexico, to Texas, migrating to Texas, and moving from California and the East Coast to be in that lower cost jurisdiction, to be in a place where they can live and work and play. So that's why Texas potentially hasn't seen kind of the bubble from then, but they're also not seeing the bubble now. They're not seeing, there is a pricing spike, like everywhere, prices are going up, but certain markets, again, think macro level, I'm going to say Nevada, Texas, Florida, these places all have 0% personal income tax. They are places people are choosing, and they're wonderful places to live. They're not for everyone, but they're wonderful places to live, and people are choosing to move to these places, not just to buy a vacation home. They're investing, working, playing. They're moving their offices and their families there. They're putting their kids in schools there. So that means I don't see bubbles happening when that stuff happens. I see people moving in migration. That's driving prices up for the long term. Where bubbles happen is when you have investors participating in the market at a scale that effectively outpaces what residential buyers are buying. That was Florida 2000. They had the epitome of it. People were going to buy whole streets. They were buying entire apartment complexes, and the whole idea was subprime mortgages. So, and we think we have cheap debt now, and they have cheap debt, and it was they would get 105% debt on their assets. So they was highly over levered. There's always an issue, again, if people have too much debt and as interest increases, that'll soften demand. I'll come back to that. But I don't believe we're quite in that state yet. What I do see is I'm glad there'll be a softening in demand as a result of that. But again, I don't see a bubble because the people I'm talking to in these various markets, the investors aren't owning the real estate for the most part. Now, there are some, again, I'm generalizing, but I don't see them buying hundreds of units at a time for the purpose of flipping. That's what really could hurt a market. I own 100 units in a golf community that I bought up on cheap debt, and then I have to sell 99 of them because I can't use them. I see the end users using them. In Hawaii, where we spent a lot of time and effort and energy understanding the various markets there, California, a lot of people there are they're buying to live and they're buying to use. So again, those are the fundamental differences at a high level that I believe drive these bubble markets, and why I don't believe we're in a bubble market right now that's going to look like a resulting crash. Now, what are the things that could soften demand? As I mentioned, interest rates, they're going up. Everyone knows. People are pricing that in, I think, right now when they're making decisions. Most people are sophisticated, and usually it's the stress tests that come along with mortgages these days in Canada and the US are going to require some form of inflation and interest rates. So the bank knows that if it goes up 2 percentage points in the next 2 years, that person can continue to afford it. So that's very positive, but that is going to slow things down a little bit from a demand perspective. The other thing, which I think will potentially increase demand, though, is also the unsettledness in the stock market. Global challenges in Europe, which is just really sad and just terrible situation. I'm Ukrainian. It actually goes pretty deep, so it's just a tough thing. But that type of stuff, that uncertainty that's created in the world, people flock to certainty. So what's not certain necessarily is a stock price that's going to continue to do well. Obviously, the stock market has been on a 10-year tear, but I think if you put 20 people in a room, I think 19 out of 20 would probably say, we got to be somewhere near the top. We're not necessarily at the top. It's come down a little bit, but people are understanding that there's going to be a bit more of a bouncy ride. So when there's uncertainty, people flock to certainty. Where do people buy? What's certain? Bricks and mortar. People love hard assets they can touch and feel and live in and rent and create revenue from. And that's where I see people now are pulling money from some of these other assets that are highly liquid. You can get your money out of the stock market or a crypto or whatever it is, pay your capital gains tax. You got money free and clear in your jeans to go invest into real estate. So I think that while you see the situation of rising interest rates, which will potentially soften demand, you have this liquidity that's going to come out of these sources of huge liquid sources going to come out, and people are going to look to spend them on something. And they're not buying gold and silver and other hard assets the way they used to be. Even some people might be into metals, and who knows for sure. But real estate becomes a play that people invest. There's lots of ways to invest in real estate, of course. REITs, private equity, or buying your own individual home, or through a limited partnership if there's someone that's managing a group of assets. But people are definitely looking at real estate as a place to ride out this next reset. The reset is, who knows? Because again, that's a crystal ball thing. I won't even comment on it. But assume there's turbulence and people are losing money in the stock market. That will also soften demand. Will it be enough? Will it be enough of a reset to soften demand for the people that have the liquidity? I know there's billions of dollars on the sidelines waiting to buy real estate on the down cycle, because that's what people do. And the ultra wealthy wait for those opportunities because that's their best buying cycles. So all these things come into play, that there's these competing factors where, yes, there's going to be softening demand, but there's actually no supplies. So there's still enough demand to eat the supply we have. Then you have this issue with all this liquidity, and people have a little bit of fear of the stock market. So maybe they'll invest in the bricks and mortar that they can control. These are the things that we think about to say, okay, I think we're in okay shape. I don't see any big reset. I don't see any great buying opportunities that are going to be like at the wholesale level where you can just go run around and buy anything you want. Which brings me to the next point, going to the micro buying, so micro markets. And I say that in the sense of a 20 home community. Will that community, how will it do in the next reset? What will it do if the prices plateau? Is there still demand for it? So when I look at these, now this is how you look at it. I don't rely on those statistics I show you to determine if I'm going to buy a place in Hawaii. I've already decided that a client or through our fund or somewhere we're going to buy there. Now it's my job, and it'll be your job, to determine what's the best place to buy that gives you the maximum protection financially from a reset, because there's going to be some stuff happening in the market, and the ability, of course, to bring yourself up. We still want to grow. If this still has another year or two of growth and some tail on it, why not grow with the market? I do the exact same process, though. I don't rely on those big statistics, but I take the exact same idea. I get the information from our brokers, and I have a good understanding of what I'm getting myself into at the micro level, right at that community level. So let's say I found this place in Hawaii, 20 home community I want to be in. I'll ask that broker for the exact same statistics. What did those units sell for in 2006, 7, 8? That is the tail. And immediately you can see, let's just say that it sold at $1,000 a foot during the bubble, the 2007 kind of peak, and it's selling for $1,100 a foot now. It's only a 10% pricing premium in 15 years. I'm probably pretty safe to say that we're not on a bubble now. You might even find places that are still below that, but for the most part, that threshold has been kind of crossed over the last 12 months. So I like using that. And your broker should be able to pull that stuff like instantaneously. Now, they're all busy, very busy. So a lot of people are going to say, well, why do you care? But I like to know. And it takes them 10 minutes to pull the statistics. Let's ask for them. So that's number one for me to say, okay, I like to see where it was back then. If it's priced at a 50% premium to what it was 15 years ago, I'm going to be concerned potentially. Well, first I want to know what that community, why everyone wants to be there. Why is it through the roof? Maybe there's good fundamental reasons why you'd still want to buy there. But I'd be a little more concerned if there is a reset, potentially this could, readjust down. So number one, good statistics. Second, supply. How much competing supply in that particular product is going to come online within the radius that could actually affect the economics of my property. So let's say I've got this 20 home community in the Big Island, and I just found out that a developer is building 160 units 1 mile down the street of basically the exact same product. That's a red flag for me. I'd be like, okay, well, by the time I've enjoyed this for a couple of years, let's say there's a big market reset, And now this guy all of a sudden has 50 homes he just built, and he's a struggling developer, financially in stress. Now he's liquidating stuff at below what he's paid just to make sure there's cash flow. That naturally is going to drag down my property. So it's kind of like a lowering tide drops all boats, a rising tide lifts all boats. So we'll come back to what a rising tide could look like. So that brings me to some concern on the supply issue. In these small markets, when we're talking about Waialae, Maui, or Big Island, or Lihue, Kauai, or some of these smaller markets, it's pretty easy to determine and ask the question about what new supply is coming on, because it takes forever for things to get entitled on these islands. I use this as an example. Forever, and every broker should know, oh yeah, that developer's been working on that for 16 years or 6 years or whatever, and they're coming online very soon, or that one's never going to get across the entitlement phase. Very easy to understand supply coming in the market, and in particular in a place like that that takes forever to bring supply onto the market. Now, alternatively, take a Phoenix, for example. You just bought into a beautiful community, and let's say it's a 1,000-home gated community with a golf course and amenity center. Well, another community could be built one section of land over with the exact same community, and they could do that in 5 years and bring on another 1,000 units. Now, proportionally to the size of the Phoenix market, it might be small, but that could put pressure on your property if you're looking for an exit if there's a reset. And there's lots of examples of where that happened in 2008. Again, because of the supply chain issues, these communities are having a tough time really launching and getting active and adding these properties consistently and quickly. So I don't see it as a big issue, but I would watch for that over the next year or two. Is okay, I'm buying this community and there's 3 competing communities being built all around me, each adding 1,000 homes. Bit of a flag, but just eyes wide open going into it. You could be competing at the same time to sell that asset if there is something significant in the market that really drops the stock market and you want to liquidate. You're going to be competing. Personally, sometimes we don't have a choice. We have to be in those situations because they're the right fit, or you're buying for lifestyle and you don't care. You just want to be in that community because it's perfect fit for you. That's awesome. That's perfect reason to do it. But if the financial aspect is very important to you, eliminate the competition. Buy in a community where no one's going to be able to compete with you for many, many years. That's what I like to do. It's what we do for our clients. We try to help them evaluate these individual markets to the best we can, using, of course, amazing talent on the ground through brokers and agents who know their stuff, so that when they ultimately choose a property, they're choosing it that says, okay, there's not any competing supply. The pricing is pretty consistent to what it was 15 years ago. Sure, maybe a 15, 20% bump, but not too much. And it's a community, potentially, third factor, that's differentiated than the rest. So maybe it's a boutique community, or maybe has a really cool amenity center, or what are the unique factors that eliminate it having a competition from something else? Maybe it has the perfect front row. And that's obviously when we talk about beach communities, beachfront ultimately is going to get more value than second, third, fourth row, because second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 27th row, you can keep going. It's still pretty close to the beach, but there's only ever one front row. Now, front row is expensive. Not everyone can afford front row, I totally understand. But anytime you can still find a front row property that may not be in the front row, but won't have a competitive nature in the future to it, because supply will never be able to compete. There's no more new beaches coming to Hawaii anytime soon. So why not take advantage of that, for your benefit when you're making that acquisition, to make an informed decision that will protect your capital and give you a chance to still ride this wave up for quite a while. So those would be kind of the key components. Now, from a demand perspective, locally, I like to, again, ask the agent, what type of buyers are coming here? And I think of 2 buckets of 2 types of buyers. We'll call it 3 types of buyers. There is the end user. So this is, like, say, the Jones family that's buying. They don't want to rent it. It's for the Jones family to use personally, and it's their personal home. They go there 1 or 2 months a year. The other rest of the time it sits empty. Then there's the part-time Airbnb person. I'll put a flag on here. We're done a STR, or short-term rental update. So go check that one out. We just did it. And there's really, really good information there about managing short-term homes, or short-term rentals. So if you're in that space, you're looking to do that, check that out. But that type of buyer is really active right now. They've got some extra cash in their jeans. They pulled it from the stock market. They want to create some supplementary revenue for their personal family, and they want to have a place they want to use. That is a very common buyer right now. So that increases the demand, number 2. And then number 3, there's the investor buyer. As I mentioned, the investor buyers are generally a little more heavy into the multifamily space than they are actually in the single family residence space. So I don't see them as active in the space because the market is priced relatively or higher relative to where we have been the past 10 years. But they do exist, and some investors are out there buying up these assets for the purpose of renting and then ultimately flipping them. But they have no intentions to use them as personal assets. It's really meant to be more of a revenue machine and for financial performance. So when I look at real estate, obviously it's nice. I'm thinking from a financial lens. I want to have all three buyers want my property. So when the time comes to sell, if I'm just an end user and I'm in a community that doesn't allow short-term rentals, again, financial lens only, I'm not saying the lifestyle side, because you may not want to be in a place where next door someone could nightly rent. But I like to have the most amount of buyer options for an ultimate disposition. And we made this mistake in the past with real estate we've acquired. We only have one or two other options to buy. I like to have all three. I want the end user buying my house. I want the passive income person buying it. And I want the sophisticated investor buying it. So this is one more way when the market resets. It's easy to sell properties right now. Like this is in our generation, the easiest time to sell assets, and take advantage of that. If this is your time to liquidate or take some money off the table, it's a perfect time to do it. But there will be adjustments. When those adjustments happen, I want the most amount of buyers at the table to acquire my home so it stands out as the preferred asset to buy, and it allows me to create liquidity quicker than when I'm competing against 100 other sellers. And ultimately, I just can't create the income quick enough. And I have to, my only way to beat them is drop price. Drop price, drop price, drop price, drop price. And that's obviously not good. So in any event, that's one more way to kind of increase demand. One more way is if you're in the short-term rental space, again, watch that video. But if you have rentals on the books and you've created a bit of a business out of your, call it your Airbnb type property, that is really interesting to those buckets, 2 and 3. Passive investors, passive users and investors, and then the sophisticated investors. When they buy a property to rent, they don't like the hustle necessarily of going to find all the clients. And that first year is always hard for a short-term renter. If you have rentals on the books, that's going to trigger a better selling opportunity for that particular type of buyer. So it's one more reason that if you're in the Airbnb space and you're looking to rent out, you will have more options potentially to rent. Now, flip side is if it's an end user, they don't want the rentals there, so you might lose a buyer on that side. So understand there's some pros and cons to it. But again, it all comes down to what your motivators are, what's important to you. And in the best case scenario is you have all buyers competing for your property, no matter what the market is, good or bad, it gives you the greatest chance of liquidity, greatest chance of capital preservation and appreciation. So that is the scoop overall when it comes to the market crash. So hopefully I give you a bit of intel on how we look at things. It is an imperfect science, obviously trying to guess the market. You just have to take the information you have, put it all together, and make an ultimate decision on what's right for you. But there are really good tools out there that a lot of people don't use because they emotionally buy or they're not really thinking it through all the time. So if the financial part is critical to your decision-making process, use these tools. Remember, if this is lifestyle, you've saved up your money, you just want to start traveling, don't overthink it. You got to, again, you kind of go what's in the heart on those. You acquire a property so you can enjoy it with your family. A lot of people sometimes overthink it and they delay the lifestyle aspect. So whole different conversation for another time. But again, even if you were to pursue that route, as I mentioned before, I don't see you on any significant downward trajectory where you're going to look back and be like, I totally regret doing that because it dropped 30% next week. I think we got a little bit of runway to go yet. And again, hope that helps today. Hope you got some interesting information. And if you like that, again, the one little nugget, like it. And right now, click and like it, please. It means a lot. Subscribe it and leave a comment. If you thought that was not valuable at all, or you don't like how I talk, or I talk too fast, I kind of do that. Make a comment. I'm cool with that. It's all right. I want feedback. Our goal is to make this relatable and relevant information for the people on the other end watching. So I need your feedback to do it better. And on the flip side as well, if you think of a topic you want to hear about that I have not talked about, I'm providing this weekly content. I need ideas. So give me your ideas. I'll shoot a video on it if I know enough about it to be to hopefully add some value to your experience. Please do so. But if you didn't like it and you found no value, then don't like it and don't share it. But I hope you did. So thanks for your time. It means the world to me. Let's hope this market continues to be prosperous in the real estate space. And until next time, hope to see you in the next show. Bye for now.